Today's episode is brought to you by The Broom List. The Broom List is the first and only matchmaking firm dedicated to pairing successful Black singles. All Broom List members are at least 28 years old, make at least $75K annually, are college educated, and most importantly, they are all ready for a long-term relationship or marriage. All Broom List members are meticulously vetted through a series of video interviews, a home tour, as well as a reference check. If you're a Black professional and you're ready to meet the one, go to tanishawood.com and apply for The Broom List. Hello, my lovely listeners. Welcome back to another episode of DRL, where we're talking everything dating, relationships, and love. I'm your host, Tanisha Wood. So many great things have been happening. The Broom List was featured on Good Morning America last week, and I am completely over the moon about it. And I've gotten so much interest, and I've been surprised by some of it, to be honest. Like, this is just something that I've wanted to do for a really long time, but I'm so glad that I finally just did it. And what's been surprising to me is the amount of good dudes that have joined. Like, typically men don't do things like this, right? So I've been coaching for a couple years now, and most of my clients have been women. You know, women tend to be the ones that are on this journey of, really doing things to make themselves better. So I actually am pleasantly surprised, and I love that so many men have reached out and have joined and are wanting long-term partnerships with Black women. So this all makes me really, really happy. I encourage you to just check it out. If you are happily partnered or married, please forward the information to a friend, because I really want to spread Black love. I want healthy, long partnerships. And I'm just really glad that you all have been on this journey with me. Other news, so this week is actually the 5-year anniversary of Black Love premiering, and it feels like forever ago, but that was another experience that I'm so glad that I got to be a part of, because it was just positive. Like, y'all, I'm overwhelmed right now by positivity. I remember in June when I was doing the podcast, and I remember not even wanting to do it because everything just felt so negative. I was like, Corona's happening. Black people are getting killed by the police all the time. Like, I just felt so down and dreary, and like I didn't have anything good to say. So I barely wanted to get on the mic, but things just feel really different right now. And in no way are most of, the world's problems solved. Black people are still getting killed by the police. Corona is still here. But I do feel like around me, there's a lot of positive things happening that make me really hopeful. So thank you all for being a part of the DRL family and for supporting not just this podcast, but a lot of things that I've been doing over the years. Today is actually, or this week rather, is the 5-year anniversary of when Black Love premiered, and it feels like forever ago. It feels like a lifetime ago. And I remember one of the most popular episodes that I did was actually an episode that I did on my breakup with Errol, who I was dating on Black Love. It was really important for me to do that episode because, well, everybody was asking about what happened and why we broke up. But more importantly, I felt like I needed to be vulnerable. Like, I needed to get that out. Like, it was cathartic for me to actually just talk about how I was feeling after that breakup, because it was so raw. Like, I was shocked, y'all. I remember when he broke up with me, how shocked I was. Like, I was like, wait, you're breaking up with me? What? But I got through it, and everything happens for a reason. And it was, I'm not going to say it was the best thing that happened, because, it wasn't at the time, especially, but it needed to happen for me to be exactly where I am today. And that is the thing that I always look back at. Whenever something bad is happening to me in a moment, I really try to remember this. I literally say to myself, Tanisha, this is happening because something great is going to happen. And this is a part of that story. Like, this bad thing that's happening right now needs to happen in order for something great to happen. So just remember that. And literally, that's the thing I tell myself all the time when something is happening that I don't like, that it needs to happen for the greater good. It's part of the bigger picture. And it's always rang true in my life. Truly, anytime something negative has happened, I've either learned from it or it is part of the bigger picture that I just don't see yet. But it is like it's truly turned into something positive. So today we're going to talk about breakups. I have Amy Chan with me, who helps women deal with and cope with and get through breakups. And so we're going to dive deep into that today. You know, how do you deal with a breakup? How do you move past it? And the thing that she really highlights in her work is that you can't just get over it. You really have to go through the process and feel the feeling. So we're going to talk to her today and really get into it. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Tanisha. So happy to be here with you.
So first off, how did you even get into the work of breakups?
My entire life, I've been a bit of an overachiever, and I was able to create the life that I wanted in my career, in my friends, in my community. But the one area I kept failing at was relationships. I just couldn't figure out the matters of the heart. And I was constantly heartbroken. I was constantly pining over people who didn't return my affections. And so I decided to do what any overachiever would do. And I'm like, I'm going to study this thing and figure it out and find out the science of it. So, I can create a solution. And so I did that. I dived into the psychology of relationships, of love, of attraction, to try to understand it. So I started as a relationship writer. And then I was finally in a relationship, the relationship of my dreams. And I thought I was going to marry this person and my life was set. And I would pack him little lunches before he went to work. The whole thing was set. And then that relationship came tumbling down one day through infidelity. And I was completely destroyed. And I stopped eating. I was in depression. I had panic attacks. I had thoughts of suicide. And I couldn't understand what was wrong with me. And as someone who prided herself of being an achiever and having her shit together, I just couldn't get over it. And it took me a really long time. And there wasn't any resource where I could go away from all the reminders of my ex and also learn about what went on, what were the patterns, how could I be accountable so it doesn't happen again the way that it did. So I thought I've got to create something.
How long were you in that relationship?
It was a little over 2 years.
And so was that your first, I guess, like big breakup where you experienced that sort of heartbreak?
I think it was the first big breakup in the sense that I thought this was it. I thought I met the one. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't only just mourning the relationship, I was mourning the future that would now never happen. Yeah. And in hindsight, I do wonder, because we did have problems and there were, red flags and compatibility, but for me, I just kind of glazed over those things because I was living the plan that I had put in place since I was, 5 years old, watching fairy tales, listening to love songs. I thought you date to get married. I was starting that by 14 years old, constantly scouting for a husband.
It's like that, it's like that Sex in the City episode where she said something like, I've been dating since I was 15. Where is he?
Yes, that was me. And so, I had the plan, and then I met someone. I was like, oh, wow, you fit really well right here. Like the last piece of this puzzle, right? Because I absorbed these messages that marriage was the finish line for me.
Yep. Do you feel like now looking back, do you see signs where you're like, yeah, he wasn't the one and I miss these signs at the beginning? Or was it at that point, the real thing?
I missed the signs. And there was so much. Oh, he had more of an avoidant attachment style, and we can talk a little bit about that
Mhm.
later. I had an anxious attachment style. I was quite codependent. I had a lot of childhood wounds that I never ever healed or even knew that I had. And so, it wasn't that he was a terrible person at all. We're actually very good friends now. It's taken a very long time. However, I don't think in the condition that I was even capable of receiving love. I believe that there was definitely care and loving feelings there, but I don't know if it was love. I think there was a lot of dependency on my part, and I think I really relied on him for me to feel okay, for me to feel safe. And I don't know if any relationship, no matter how wonderful your partner is, could sustain that much responsibility for your
Right.
someone else's peace and happiness.
So once you guys broke up, what steps had you taken to try to get over that hump?
I mean, in the beginning, I just had no idea what I was doing because I couldn't get out of bed. I wouldn't eat. My friends would come and they would bring food, and I just couldn't eat. And this happens because what happens on a like a biological level, after a big trauma and after a traumatic breakup, what happens is your body goes into like a survival state, and so food and appetite kind of goes fifth on the totem pole of priority. So you just have no appetite. So I didn't know what I was doing. And yes, after I kind of got out of that initial slump of shock, I went into my brain. So I was just reading every article I could to understand what causes infidelity. I just wanted to put together the pieces so I could understand, because I thought, hey, if I go into detective mode and I could figure it out, then maybe I would get that closure. But it
Right.
didn't matter. It didn't matter that I reached out to the woman. It didn't matter that I read all these articles and researched it. Nothing was going to give me the closure that I ultimately had to create for myself, which was going through a process of mourning and grieving and allowing the space for that to happen, and then putting myself back together and understanding what part of me, what were my patterns and belief systems that led me here, where the rug could be ripped out from underneath me. Why was someone else the foundation of my house? Someone else was a foundation of what I was standing on. Why did that happen? And that was a slow unraveling to figure that part out.
And once you started digging more into that in terms of this relationship, did you start to see that maybe some of those patterns had existed previously in other relationships? It just, came out differently because this was a longer term relationship?
Totally. I realized that this was the band-aid being ripped off. And for me to deal with not only the pain from what had just happened, but from all that compound trauma that I never dealt with. And I think my first heartbreak was really the one with my dad. And being in a very traditional Chinese household, my father was a busy entrepreneur. He was never around, not physically or emotionally. And I was always trying to earn his love and attention. And at a very young age, I absorbed a message and a belief system that, oh, when I got good grades, I got a bit of attention and he would give me some money. And I developed a belief that I'm not enough. I'm not enough as I am. So I need to adapt by being overachieving, by being useful, by being very nurturing and giving and putting the needs of other people before myself. And
Mhm.
of course, as an adult, you don't remember the scene of the crime. You don't remember the trauma of what happens between 0 to 7.
Right.
And so you just go through life and you're like, well, what's wrong with me? Maybe I should read Cosmo and do better sex tips to keep him entertained. And like, maybe I should text him 5 hours after he texts me. Like you
You try to do
develop
all this
all
external stuff versus just looking within.
totally. Yeah.
So once you started doing all the research about, breakups and how they happen and why they happen and, why you were feeling the way that you did, like, how did you then go from that to turning a corner to getting over it?
So I tried everything to heal. I went to therapy, like traditional therapy. I went to yoga retreats, meditation, Reiki, psychics, you name it, I tried it. And there were moments, definitely phases where I would be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm over it. I'm on top of the world, girl power." And then I would see a photo on social media, or I would hear that he, met someone else, tall, skinny, blonde girl. And I would just be like livid or angry or crying. And I'm like, wow, all the work I did was for nothing. I'm back to feeling like I've completely lost myself. But what I didn't realize was that all those things that I was doing, even if I didn't have the big breakthrough, aha, epiphany moment, it was all adding up. Every little part was helping, right? The Reiki was helping, the therapy was helping. And eventually, it wasn't until about 2.5 years later. And I had gone over the emotional intensity of the breakup, and I was dating, but I had a closed heart and I was jaded. Yeah. And I was still repeating the story to whoever who would listen. And I remember this one moment, I was catching up with a friend. I hadn't seen him for a long time. And I was telling him the story. I'm like, he cheated and he did this. Can you believe it? And my friend Dennis, he just stopped me and he said, "So, Amy, does this story serve you?" I'm like, "Well, no." He's like, "Can you tell me another time where there was kindness and support and love?" And he's like, "Tell me some examples." I was like, "Yeah, of course." I'm like, "There was this and there was this." And it was in that moment I realized that for over 2 years, I could only see the bad and the darkness because that's all I was looking for. Mm-hmm. And the human psyche is tricky. You will find whatever you were looking for.
100%.
And I forgot everything else that was good. I forgot what was great that was happening in my life, that I was moving out of Vancouver, going to go to New York, that I was building, a new life and diving into relationship psychology. I realized that I couldn't change the events of what had happened, but I could change the story I attached to those events.
Yep.
And I went home that day. I wrote him a letter on beautiful pink stationery. And I was like, this is what happened, the facts of what happened, how I am totally accountable for my part as well. And I know you tried your best. I know I tried my best. And a lot of great things have happened from that. And I'm grateful and I forgive you. And I let this go. And thank you. I didn't expect a response back. And from that moment on, I did not feel an ounce of resentment or anger. It was just this big sigh of relief.
Because you gave yourself permission to just finally let it go.
Totally. And, it wasn't, just that moment. That was the glue that glued all of the other things, right? The reading of the books, the listening to the podcast, the Reiki, the yoga retreat. It right. Just glued it all together for me to finally have that big aha moment. And I accepted it and I let go.
So after that, he was like no longer your first thought in the morning. He was just sort of another person that you'd learned from, and it wasn't like that intense feeling that you'd had before.
Yeah, because, after a while, I stopped missing him. Like the romantic feelings eventually faded, but there was bitterness. There was this like sort of injustice of like, how did you do this to me? Mm-hmm. And you can hang on to that for a really long time. People say time heals all wounds. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Doing the work to heal the wounds heals the wounds.
Right. So a lot of people, when they go through something like that, like an intense breakup, and it takes them a really long time to get over it, it's often hard for them to then go into another relationship because all they're thinking about is the fear from the last relationship. Is he going to cheat on me? Is he going to treat me this way? Is this relationship going to turn out just like the last one? And am I going to end up back in the same place? So when you started dating again, how did you sort of put those fears to the side?
Trust takes time to rebuild. And it's not just trust in other people, it's trust in yourself. And when my relationship fell apart and I didn't see the ending coming, I stopped trusting myself. I questioned my own intuition, my own gut. I said, how stupid was I? How dumb am I? And I had a lot of shame around that. So I think the very first step was rebuilding the trust with myself. And that took time. And it took putting myself out there, meeting different types of people. It took a long time for me to open up my heart again, because on a cognitive level, even though through the years and through meeting different people and getting into other relationships, I was able to get over what had happened. My body had memory of what happened. I guess my spirit and my soul had memory of what happened. So even though I was saying I want a relationship, I'm ready to meet my partner, the outcome was not aligned. And I think that is a big signal for anyone who's listening. When you say you want something and you look at the outcome of your experience and it's consistently not matching, that means there's likely a misalignment of your conscious and your subconscious. So what I needed to do was, after on a cognitive level, I was able to accept and forgive and let go, I actually had to go another layer and get into the subconscious. And I did this through doing cognitive behavioral therapy. We do this at our Breakup boot camp, of really looking at subconscious beliefs and starting to rewire that. I did hypnotherapy. I did like a mushroom ceremony. I did many different things to get into the subconscious.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like after you did those, you kind of rewired yourself in a way?
Totally. I'm in a very healthy relationship now. For me, looking back, the heartaches were all worth it. For me, I needed to go through heartache after heartache and learn the hard way for me to take the knowledge and what I read in books and what you see on those Instagram posts, for me to actually embody that as wisdom. Because it's very different, right? And I work with a lot of people who, they know on a cognitive level that they're in a toxic relationship, or they keep going for the toxic person, or they keep chasing the person who's not interested in them. But there's something, they just can't help it. Everything in their body is saying green light, even though their brain is saying red light. I think just getting the cognitive aligned with what's going on a subconscious level, it's such a process. As a relationship expert, I did many experiments on myself. I had to really learn and figure out how to rewire what I call your chemistry compass, because human beings we're wired to like what is familiar. And this is across the board, from food to music to our type. And if your model of love growing up was unhealthy or toxic, or you witness a codependent relationship with your parents, that's familiar to you. That's your homeostasis. And so when you go out into the world and you create romantic relationships, your chemistry compass is pointing you to the person who can wound you very similarly to how you're wounded as a child. So if your chemistry compass is broken, you first need to acknowledge it. And then second thing is, you need to work on fixing it.
And a lot of the times, like you said, that stuff comes from childhood, but we don't think about it like that in the moment. We'll say, I don't know why I'm always attracting this type of guy. I don't know why, where I live, there's only these types of toxic men. Like, we'll blame it on all sorts of other things, whether that be our environment or the dating sites that we're on. But we don't actually take the time a lot of the times to trace it back to, but why am I actually attracting these men? Why are these the men I'm choosing? Because it is a choice. And then once you go back and you dig and you dig and you peel and you peel and you peel, you realize there's generally an event that happened at some point in your life with an important figure, a relationship figure, a parental figure, that just shifted and shaped the way that you saw it. And it never leaves you. You're right. Like what you said, it's your homeostasis. It's just there.
Yeah. Tanisha, was that your experience? Did you have a certain kind of homeostasis that you were drawn to over and over again?
Oh, I'm still that way. I am still like, it's funny. Just the other day, I was back home in Minnesota with my parents, and my boyfriend was also there. And I realized I'm 100% attracted to a man that is much like my father. And if I don't end up with a man like that, I'm often comparing, and the shortcomings come from, oh, well, like my dad would do this. Like, and it was like something simple the other day, but we were at the house, and my dad is just always fixing stuff. He can fix anything. He can build anything. And so I said to my boyfriend, I was like, oh, do you see my dad out there just like building and fixing? Like, isn't that cool? He just builds and fixes stuff. And slightly insulting a little bit, because my boyfriend happens to not be that type of guy. He's generally on a computer,
Right.
And but yeah, even to the type of dress that I like a man to wear. Like I don't like it when men like, are extremely like, I don't like it when men dress better than me, I guess is what I say. Like I don't like a man to be like just concerned about his look. Like my dad wears four colors. It's like black, gray, navy blue, and like a
Right.
forest green. And that's generally like the type of man I'm attracted to, a man with a little flash. So yeah, for me, it does all go back to I believe a man should be like my father. And
Mm,
luckily, I think my father's a really good man,
right.
but I still think it's unfair to sort of have that expectation
Right.
out of every man. Because, like every other man, my father has his flaws,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
everybody comes with their stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So don't take your boyfriend to IKEA anytime soon.
Exactly. He'll be like, I mean, I can get it built. I can call somebody to build that for you if you'd
I can
like.
figure out an algorithm.
Exactly. Is there an AI to this? Oh. Well, you touched on this briefly, but what are the stages of a breakup? I mean, it's similar to the stages of grief for, a death or anything else that's been lost.
Totally. Yeah. So it's important to understand the stages of a separation because you can't skip them. And so when people are like, I just want to get over it, how can I get over it? I'm like, well, you actually need to go through it. And so the very first stage is shock. This is your body's way of actually not overwhelming yourself, your nervous system with the reality of what's going on. And so it's like, oh my gosh, something just happened. And then it goes into denial. And denial is like, okay, this is the new reality, but is it? Because if it's 100% full wham into your face, you're going to get overwhelmed and you might get paralyzed. So your body's actually trying to help you through these stages. So it goes from shock to denial. The next stage is sadness, which could lead into depression. This is when you realize, like, oh my God, like, I think this is it. This is over. And then you start feeling the missing comes in really strong here. And then the next stage is anger. People think anger is this bad thing, but anger in the stages of separation and grief is actually helpful because anger is actually energy moving. So you go from a stage of like feeling apathetic and down and you can't get up and get out of your bed to anger kind of just gives you a bit of like that energy of like, okay, you might be blaming the world or you might be blaming the person or you're blaming yourself, but at least you now you start going like, okay, like maybe I can do something about
It
this. Maybe you want
counteracts the
to
depression.
totally. So, and then after anger, there's a sneaky stage that may or may not come up, which is relapse. And this is when going back to denial, this is when you go into your brain and you're like, the shoulds happen. I should have done this. Well, maybe if I just reach out, maybe if we just try one more time, oh, make up sex, it's fine, right? So you create all of these kind of excuses and rationalize your way into seeing your ex again or check out their social media. And sometimes you get stuck in the stage for a while and you get back together and you break up many times until you hit a stage where like, holy shit, if I keep doing this, I'm just going to be miserable for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And you hit kind of a tipping point when you say, enough is enough. I need to stop. And then you go into a stage of acceptance when you're like, this happened. It sucked. And I'm going to now look on moving forward. How do I move forward? And you get into a more solutions-based mindset of actually carving your future versus constantly just focusing your energy on the past and directing the energy towards your ex.
At the beginning of a breakup, what are some of the first steps you should take? I know for some people, they'll be like, okay, first thing I got to do, I got to delete them off Instagram and Facebook. And some of that might be ego driven versus, an actual utility to helping them.
Right. It's like a stab, right?
Right. Do you recommend doing things like that? Just sort of cutting off all communication? Should people, sort of ease into it, have some communication? What are some of the first steps that you should take once, somebody has said, yeah, it's over?
Yeah, great question. After a breakup, you should 100% detox from your ex in every way possible, physically, mentally, spiritually. That means delete the text messages, remove them off social media. When you have thoughts of fantasizing about what should have been, have a strategy in place to distract yourself so that you can actually get back into the present moment. I mean, of course, this is a lot harder, to do than it is to say. And I'm going to tell you the reason why, right? Because it's very easy to be like, just don't talk to the person. But when you understand what's happening in the brain, it might encourage you to actually detox. What's happened is when you're in a relationship with someone, you have neural pathways that have wired together. And so the longer you've been with this person, the more memories you share, you have more neuronal connections with this person. You're used to getting fed your sources of dopamine and oxytocin, all those feel-good chemicals from this relationship, from the time that you guys have sex to the times you guys have a fight and then get back together. All of that, you're getting hits and hits and hits of dopamine. And so when you break up, your brain might understand on a cognitive level that it's over, but your body doesn't. And you need to give it time for those neural connections to actually prune away. Because the more you feed them by looking at their social media, that's actually your brain craving a hit of dopamine. And you're getting that by looking at that photo. Even if it makes you feel like shit, you're still getting a hit. What does that do? It continues strengthening those neuronal connections. The only way for those neural connections to start to prune away is for you to starve them. So if you detox, and I would say give yourself 3 full months, if you need to set a boundary with the person, communicate that. If you think it's too harsh to just do it, whatever it works for you, give it 3 months. After 3 months, do an assessment. Are you ready to, have communication, dialogue, see how you feel then? But you need to give a period of time.
Should you ever get back with an ex?
I think it depends. If there is new data that has been presented, that something is going to change. Because if you broke up for, certain reasons, incompatibility, infidelity, betrayal, and whatever those reasons are, unless there's been some sort of a change, you're just going to go back and the exact same patterns are going to lock back into place. And so I think that change is quite hard. I don't think it happens overnight. I don't think it happens after 2 months. But if someone is very serious about change and they're investing in it, and 2 people, because it always takes 2 people are equally invested in creating the partnership, in strengthening it, and they're going to do A, B, C in order to really give it a chance at success, yes, you can try. But if you're just giving lip service of like, no, I'm just going to, be really loyal from now on, it's not going to work.
Right. So a really specific set of guidelines on how you plan to move forward and have things change from how they were before, if you are going to do it.
Yeah. Intention and action and impact. You can't just have intention. It doesn't mean anything.
Typically, what's the cycle for most people in terms of getting over it, or at least being at a place where they're not, as emotionally torn apart as they were at the beginning?
Yeah.
Is that generally the 90-day thing?
It does depend. And everyone always wants to know, like, what's the number? When am I going to hit it? I would say in my experiencing of witnessing women through the breakup process, the first weeks are going to be the hardest, where you feel like you've just been hit by an emotional train. And that intensity will subside in about, I think, 6 to 8 weeks. You can count that the intensity will start to minimize. And then after that, you get into the brain stuff, right? When you're thinking about them, you're ruminating, you might be angry or upset. And that can take there's some studies that show it takes around 8 months to 12 months for that to start to really, really minimize. And so I guess those are some benchmarks that you can have. But again, it does depend on you and the context. If you have an anxious attachment style, meaning you are more predisposed to having an inherent fear of abandonment and rejection, and you're more predisposed to being codependent and relying on your partner to give you validation and identity, you will take breakups the hardest out of everyone. And I generally work with people who have an anxious attachment style because it's so hard for them. People have an avoidant attachment style who subconsciously suppress their attachment system. So they generally have an emotional distance from people, even when they're in relationships, they don't have as much emotional intensity. It doesn't mean that they're not feeling it and that they're actually not feeling stress and cortisol levels. It's just that they have gone so long suppressing it on a subconscious level. They're not even aware that there's all this turmoil that's going on a biological level.
Wow. So one of the things I've noticed about breakups is that men and women tend to take them differently. It seems like immediately after a breakup, a woman is going through that turmoil and everything's falling apart and woe is me. Whereas a man seems to take the opposite approach immediately after, where, he's like, yay, freedom. And he's out and about and seemingly, I don't know if it's facts, seemingly having a good time and sort of enjoying that freedom. And then it sort of shifts where the woman is like, okay, I'm starting to get over it. And the man is like, oh my God, I want you back. I miss you. But they are on different sides of the spectrum at different times. Why is it different generally?
Research has shown that men and women react differently after a breakup. And whether this is socialization or why, I'm not going to get into that. But generally what we see is, yes, a man may seem on the outside like they're over it. So they might go drinking with their buddies. They might get back onto the dating apps. They might even jump into a new relationship. And this causes havoc on the women because they're like, what the hell? I'm in a puddle of tears. I'm like suicidal, and this guy is out at the bar with 3 broads on his arm, right? And the women's freaking out and they're like, how adjust? But what's different is, and this might be from socialization, is the woman is going through the process of feeling the emotions, and as they're feeling them, they're processing them. Right? There's not compound trauma that's happening, which is inevitably what happens when you suppress your emotions. And so when the men are suppressing their emotions, avoiding them, disassociating from them, and using other things to distract them, such as sex, alcohol, and partying, what do you think happens? Do the emotions just go away? No, they don't. They sit there like a poison and they eventually add up. And that is why research shows that men are more likely to commit suicide after heartbreak than women are. Wow. And so there definitely is a difference in the processing. And I really, really believe that anyone who's going through a traumatic breakup or heartbreak, you need to give yourself the time to mourn. And when I am working with someone who's in the throes of a breakup, I don't want to take away their pain. That's not the point. You need to let someone feel the pain, because if they don't feel it now, they're going to feel it 10 times harder later, and it's going to come out in very toxic ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when we think about death, we all expect there to be this mourning period where, I've lost this very special person to me. They're no longer a part of my life. And it's okay to mourn, and we're expected to mourn and be sad and go through all those stages. But we don't address or think about breakups in the same way, because the person is still alive, though they're no longer a part of our life. We just think of it like, well, you should get over it. So in our minds, when we're not getting over it, it feels like, what is wrong with me? I should be over this.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I think that also in our North American culture, we're so quick. If you have a broken leg, you go to the doctor, you take medicine. What happens when you have a broken heart? Like, that is a major like catastrophe. Right. And what, you should just get over it? The hell? That's crazy.
I mean, it is what people say. Get over it. That's done. Get over it. And they
worst advice ever.
Yeah. So I'm really glad that you have a process in place so people don't just have to, get over it. So when people are dealing with friends and family, maybe they have mutual friends or, family members have grown close to their former significant other. How do they handle things like that?
I really encourage people who still have a community that's connected with the ex to draw boundaries. And so, especially when you're in the detox stage of the breakup, where you are not having any communication, not looking at their social media, you need to actually equip your friends and your community to support you the best that they can. And part of this might be having those uncomfortable conversations and saying, hey, I know you're friends with the both of us right now during this time of mourning. I don't want to hear anything about that person. So if they've moved on, if you see them, on social media having a drink, please do not tell me, because right now I'm going through my process of detoxing. And so set people up for your own success, and set these procedures in place and the systems in place so that you can actually detox in a successful way.
Yeah. So one time I was going through a breakup, and I told that to my friends. I said, I don't want to hear about him. I know you guys are all friends on social media, and just whatever you see, I don't really care. I've moved on. I am trying to move on. And so then I got so curious, and I had, blocked him and done all of those things. And so then I asked my best friend for her Facebook login, because I was like, I didn't want to ask her, because I asked her not to tell me anything. So I was just like, I see something on Facebook. Can I just use your login? And then I went to his page, and I was like, oh my God, what is wrong with me?
Oh yeah, the spiral happens to the best of us.
Yeah. So I guess, what is, your number one piece of advice for somebody that might be going through a breakup right now?
I mean, I think it depends on the stage, but say you're after the detox stage, right? The freshness of the emotional intensity has subsided. And now you're like, oh, I'm still thinking about the person. I don't know how to move on. What are they doing on social media? You have to think about when you were in a relationship, and say you had a pie, okay? How much of that pie was devoted to the relationship? And especially if you're have more codependent tendencies, your pie might have been like 80% relationship. So after the relationship is over, you have 80% to fill. If you're not strategic and proactively creating a plan of how you're going to fill up that pie and get your needs met, you are obviously going to fill it up with thoughts of your ex. So you have to be smart about it. Create a strategy, create a plan, figure out what are those needs, right? Connection. How are you going to get connection in a healthier way? Maybe it's volunteering. Maybe it's, okay, once a week, you're going to get together with 3 of your friends, or Zoom calls, whatever it is. If it's physical touch, research shows that Swedish massages actually give you certain chemicals that make those feel-good chemicals that you would get when you have physical affection, right? You can even actually hug yourself. Your body can't tell the difference between when someone's hugging you and when you're giving yourself a hug. So you're still getting that self-soothing. You need to figure it out and be very disciplined in following that plan. But if you have no plan at all, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to be logging into your friend's Facebook to go and check them out.
So a lot of times people will say, I can't move on because I have so many unanswered questions, and there's so many things I still don't know. And so I need to have a long conversation with him. I need to speak to him about these things. Is that a good idea? Or is it better just to say, you know what? It doesn't matter what he has to say.
If you think that having a conversation is going to give you closure, you're mistaken, because the conversation itself will not give you closure. Closure is a process of acknowledging what happens, understanding the facts of what happened, finding the lessons and the silver lining and the growth of what happened, acknowledging your part, accepting, forgiving, and letting go. That entire process, which happens from a series of things that you do, is what creates closure on an internal level, because closure is really a sense of peace. But a conversation from your ex is not going to give you that entire process. And so it might give you a little bit of information that can help you with one part of it, but don't think that a conversation in and of itself is going to give you that peace you're seeking.
Is it better to get that though? Because, okay, for example, in the relationship that sort of led you to this work, I'm sure you wondered, well, why did you do this? Certainly there are questions in a situation like that, but is it better to get those questions answered, or is that just sending your mind down a crazy worse rabbit hole than it would have been?
Personally speaking, after my breakup, my ex was trying to get me back. He felt very guilty, and he would be open to having conversations. We even did a joint therapy session to try to create this closure conversation, which went terrible because I just went into attacking and blaming him. I do not think that it helped me at all. I think that even though I, at the time, hated him and blamed him, and I was so torn from him, he was still the person I was used to get my comfort and soothing from. And so any sort of communication was a subconscious attempt for me to keep a hook into that relationship, even though I said I didn't want it, right? And so I think sometimes holding on to the pain and creating scenarios where we'll actually get more rumination and feel more pain is our desperate attempts to hold on to whatever's left of the relationship.
Interesting. I talked to a divorce attorney recently that was on the show, and she said the same thing about couples going through a divorce where one person will often hang on to anything that they can, but that might be, the china that no one ever used, but it becomes this big point of contention because they're just trying to hang on. They're just trying to keep communication. They're just trying to have something. And so, you'll use at that point, like your brain will use anything.
Yeah, I took the shower curtain, by the way.
This is mine and there are no more like it. This is very special to me.
Yeah.
Wait, the liner or the actual, like the plastic?
Oh,
you will not shower.
Yes. Like, I want the water to splash everywhere.
That's hilarious. Oh, the things we do in a breakup.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad that all, led you to where you are today and the work that you're doing. So with your breakup boot camp, how does that all work?
Before COVID, we have physical retreats out in nature in either New York or California. And it was usually 100-acre estate where we would bring in a chef and a team, and everything's organic and healthy for you. And I would bring in 13 experts ranging from psychologists, behavioral scientists, hypnotists, sex educators, even a dominatrix with a PhD from Berkeley who teaches on the psychology of power dynamics, because most of the women I work with, they're high achieving and they want to just get over it. And so, but a lot of them struggle with feeling disempowered in their relationship. The women who come, not all of them are actually in a breakup. So 30% are usually still in a relationship. Sometimes they're in a relationship that's quite toxic with someone who has narcissistic tendencies. And other times there are women who are single, who just have dating patterns that they want to break. And the others are either getting over a breakup or a divorce. Some very fresh, and some the divorce or breakup was many years ago.
So what's the process?
So there's an entire process of how we take them through this journey. And they're in programming from 8:30 morning till 11 at night. So it's super intense, and it's designed that way intentionally. Most women who come have gone through traditional therapy and have hit a wall where they're like, it's not working. And, instead of getting an hour of talk therapy every week or two, which is very still cognitive, we really immerse them in a holistic process where it's mind, body, heart, spirit, soul. And so the Friday is really about processing the emotions in a healthy way. How do you not re-traumatize yourself when you tell your story? How do you deal with anxiety and panic attacks, and actually learning the tools of how to emotionally regulate and self-soothe? Very key things that we should be learning in school. And love addiction. We deal a lot with love addiction and codependency. And so we bring in an expert specifically on that. And then the Saturday, we bring in the psychologists and the behavioral scientists, and we really look at what are those subconscious patterns. And we look at the past relationships really for data collection, because it's never just about the ex, it's recycled pain. So we want to understand what is the thread between your emotional experiences, because the type might look different, right? The package of the person you choose might look different, but the emotional experience is often very similar. And so if you're chasing someone for love and attention, that probably stems back to a subconscious wound and a belief system. So we work on that, and we take them through a process of rewiring that. Then we have a hypnosis session and a session where they actually get in touch with their inner child and learn how to speak to it and heal that inner child that is in us, like really ignored and neglected. And then Sunday is like the really fun part. Sunday is like everyone's in high spirits. They're like, what's my ex's name? I don't even remember. And they're like, yes, I'm going to like go change the world. And that's when we bring in the sex educator, we bring in the dominatrix, and it's really, okay, like moving forward, what is a life and love you want to create? We look at how are you going to choose better the next time? And Monday is our last day together. We kind of wrap everything up together and send the women off. And now we're doing them in online formats because of COVID, but it's a very similar process.
So you have a book coming out.
I do, yes.
Yeah,
Breakup Boot Camp. The book's called Breakup Boot Camp, The Science of Rewiring Your Heart. And really, it is all the tools that we've tried and tested at Breakup Boot Camp. And the entire process is there for the people who can't make the boot camp in person. And I bring in the different experts. So we have the psychologists and behavioral scientists and the sex educators all providing their expertise and tools and systems on helping people, not just if you've gone through a breakup, and that's a thing, right? Like breakups is a great catalyst for people to want to seek change. But really the work that I do is for just anyone who wants to shift their patterns, because it's never about the ex, it's recycled pain. And the book is weaved in with personal stories of myself and the women that I have worked with. And yeah, there's appearances of my ex in there and other people I've dated. Names have been changed, and you can find out how the ending goes.
Well, quick question on the ex. So you said you guys are like, at a good place now. How does he sort of feel about, him being the catalyst for the work that you do now?
I asked him that, and we're actually very good friends. Like he jokes he should have shares in my company, and I give him relationship advice on how to communicate better with his girlfriend. And I asked him like, hey, how do you feel that I get so much media and like you're kind of the catalyst? And he's like, I'm so fucking proud of you.
Aww.
And it's amazing. Like we truly now have love for each other, and it's not romantic and it's not sexual, but it is this deep caring that we both want the best for each other. And yeah, we didn't work out as a unit, a romantic unit, but we worked out as friends. So it's quite beautiful. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that story completely, turned around and you're able to see him from a new vantage point and in a new light and create a new and different sort of relationship with him.
Yeah. And I never thought this was possible. And so for anyone out there listening who, maybe you're in the throes of breakup and even creating revenge plans like I had crazy revenge plans, one that involved buying bed bugs off Craigslist. Never thought I would be here today where I'm like friends with my ex, but it's possible.
Wow. Where can people reach you?
You can find more on renewbreakupbootcamp.com. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Miss Amy Chan.
Okay. And then your book is Breakup Boot Camp, The Science of Rewiring Your Heart. And so that comes out this week, and we'll put a link on the site for that. Thank you so much for coming on. This was like super informative, and I know that people will get a lot out of this. So really appreciate your time today.
Thank you. This was so fun.
And you can reach out to me at Tanisha Wood on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And until next time, wish me love. Hello again, my lovely listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of DRL. If you like the show, be sure to go on iTunes and leave a rating and also write a review. And don't forget to share with your friends and tell them all about DRL. Thank you so much for supporting.